Registrations are now open for our ACCA Performance Management exam course. Get access to our comprehensive playlist of over 46 hours of content, including concept videos covering the entire syllabus, exam videos explaining how those concepts are tested in the exam, and question videos to help you with exam practice. Subscribe to one of our packages. The smallest package, for $10, you get access to the entire course for 7 days. Or you can subscribe to one of our longer term packages. For more information, check out the links in the description below. And now, on to the video. Hello everyone, and how are you all doing today? So today we'll be doing yet another question for the ACCA Performance Management exam. This time the question we're doing is from the December 2020 past paper. It's scenario number 2, and it's a question for basically a school in the country of Deutschland and who are accountable to the Department of Education. The topic of the question is for not-for-profit entities and analyzing not-for-profit entities. And it's a good question to do because while the topic is somewhat popular in the exam, there aren't too many past paper questions that ACCA has released on this topic. So that's why it's a good question for us to practice, and it's a more recent one as well. So as always, we'll start with the requirements. So the first part is Part A, explain the problems which not-for-profit organizations face as a result of having multiple objectives, for 4 marks. So it hasn't asked us to refer to the school or the case, so we can just talk about it from a generic standpoint on what are the problems that not-for-profit organizations face as a result of having multiple objectives. And we've covered this in our syllabus videos as well. So let's just quickly write them down. There's 4 marks for it, so let's try to get around 4 points. So we can start by saying not-for-profit organizations often have to deal with multiple objectives which they need to achieve. One of the reasons for this is that they often have multiple stakeholders interested in the organization, each with their own set of requirements, right? We're just giving a brief background. This results in various problems for such organizations. Now, since we're using not-for-profit organizations, we can use the shorthand in brackets at the start, NFP, so that we don't have to continuously type not-for-profit, and then we can use that subsequently. First of all, having multiple different objectives can result in conflicts between such objectives, right? And since the case scenario deals with a school, we can give the example of a school. For example, a public school can have an objective to keep costs low to meet the budget, but also to provide high quality education. Providing higher quality education usually would result in having to incur more costs, making it difficult to stay within the budget, right? So that's one issue. Then we can carry on and say, apart from conflicts, it will be difficult to prioritize which objectives should be met first. Secondly, it will be difficult to prioritize between the different objectives, right? A profit-oriented entity, the first objective and the main stakeholder are always the shareholders. Everything comes after that, so they know what they have to prioritize. Not the case for not-for-profit entities. Should the priority be to their employees? Should it be to their customers? Should it be to the government or their sponsors? It depends on the situation, right? This can result in confusion among the management and staff, as they will not be sure on which objective to prioritize in a difficult situation, right? So there's another issue. Then there's the issue of having multiple objectives. It's usually tied with multiple stakeholders, and they can cause further conflicts within the organization, like we've already mentioned. Furthermore, given that the multiple objectives are usually the result of multiple stakeholders, the organization might find itself in between the conflict of interests of various stakeholders, which will compromise the consistency of the organization's overall strategy and operation, right? One person is telling you to go in a certain direction, another person is telling you to go in another direction, and that'll just cause confusion and so on, right? And basically we've developed the point in quite a bit of detail. It's just for 4 marks, so we don't need to delve too much in. If there's any other points, if we have time, we can always come back to this later. But an important thing to remember is not to get bogged down. It's just for 4 marks. Let's move on. So the next part is the main part of this question for 12 marks. It says, assess Tonford School's performance against the objectives set by the Department of Education using the performance data published on the Department of Education's website. Note, use the 4 objectives in the template provided to structure your answer. And they've given us 4 different objectives, and to save time, I've already put them in our Word file so that we can easily fill them out. Okay, so let's read through the case now. So the text is a bit small in this exam. If you're having trouble reading it in the video, just open the past paper, just type ACCA 5 December 2020 past paper, and it'll be probably the first link there, right? So it says all schools in the country of Duckland are funded by the state and accountable to the Department of Education, which oversees education standards and monitors the performance of schools. The Department of Education's objectives, which are also the objectives for all the schools in Duckland, are to strive for continuous improvement, and basically these 4 objectives, right? So let's just read through them once quickly so that we have an overall understanding. So continuous improvement in performance standards, provide supportive learning environment which encourages high student or pupil achievement, ensure pupils are prepared for adult life and have the skills and character necessary to contribute to society and the economy, and provide all children with access to high quality of education regardless of their location and background, right? So the last one is basically quality and diversity. The third one is to ensure that the pupils are well prepared for life after school. The second one is for supportive environments, and the first one is just continuously improving. Okay, it says summary performance data for each school is accessible via DOE's website, which is what we need to use in this question. Parents in Duckland have the right to choose which school their child should attend, and many parents use the data to help their selection. Inspectors from the DOE visit each school at the end of every 5 years. The DOE believes that to gain a better insight into the quality of the teaching and learning environment, inspectors should attend a selection of lessons and speak to some of the pupils. Tonford has recently had its inspection visit, and the school's data has been updated following the visit. So we have the following data: exam results, pupil progress, inspection grade, pupil numbers, and number of teaching staff. And based on this data, we need to assess their performance against the objectives. So what do we need to do? We need to analyze how Tonford School has performed with regards to achieving each of these objectives. So we don't need to suggest improvements or anything like that. That's not what they're asking. They're just asking us to assess their performance. So we need to see this is what they did good, this is what they did bad. That's all. No need to suggest any improvements or anything. Okay. So we'll start with the first objective: strive for continuous improvement in performance standards. So if we look at the table over here, we have their actual data for 2017, the national target, and their actual data for 2012. So we can benchmark against the historic data of the school, compare them against their performance from 5 years ago, as well as to the national overall target. And we can see where they're improving. That would mean they're improving in the performance standards in those criteria, and where they're not improving. So let's just read through the notes as well to get an overall understanding. Exam results, note 1. The exam results indicator shows the percentage of pupils leaving the school with at least 5 final exams, including compulsory subjects of mathematics, science, and languages. So basically, the higher this is, the better, right? So their results are falling in this regard compared to 5 years ago, as well as a national target. So that doesn't seem to be good. Then it says pupil progress is an indicator of how well pupils have performed in compulsory subjects in the final exams at age 16 compared to their performance in intermediate exams at age 11. Academic grades are given on numerical values, and pupil progress score is the movement in the average of the pupil's grades. Scores typically range between minus 0.5 and 0.5. So how much have they improved from their exams at age 11 to their exams at age 16? So this shows how well the pupils are progressing. Okay, and in this they've achieved both, improved their target from the previous two. So while the overall grades have fallen, the pupil progress has actually improved. So this might suggest that the standard of the pupils they're taking in initially has fallen, right? Not every student is the same. Some students are sharper or smarter or more hardworking than others. So that's part of the grades. So grades of the students depend on, one, yes, the quality of the teaching in the school, of course, but also the quality of the students as well. So the quality of the students might have fallen. That might be one reason for this grade falling. But due to that, the school has also been able to improve the quality of the students over time more as well, right? There's more room to improve basically, per se. But let's go on. It says there are 6 inspection grades for number 3. Excellent, very good, good, average, poor, etc. So they've improved to very good from good. So they've also improved in this performance standard. And then it says the inspector summary report for Tonford has concluded that there is a very strong sense of community values and citizenship. This will be relevant for probably the contribute to society objective later on. And pupils appear to have a genuine respect for teacher and one another despite their diverse backgrounds. So this will probably be applicable to objective number 4. And finally, it says the DOE recommends that the pupil to teacher ratio be less than 22:1. And they've given us a number of pupils and a number of teachers. So this is basically telling us that we need to perform the calculation to find the pupil to teacher ratio. So that will be the 4th aspect. So there's 4 standards we can look at: the exam results, pupil progress, inspection grade, and pupil to teacher ratio for the first objective. So let's start with objective 1. First of all, we say the exam results objective standard seems to have fallen for Tonford School. It is now at 62% compared to 64% 5 years ago, and a national target of 65%. Now, the examiner report keeps mentioning this, so please pay attention. This is not enough. You can't just say, oh, this is bad. No, what could be a reason for this? Why has the standard seemingly fallen? And what does it mean overall for Tonford with regards to the achievement of this standard? This seems to indicate, this indicates that Tonford is not achieving the required standard. However, it is also important to consider the possible reasons for this. It could either be due to a lack of quality of teaching on Tonford's part, or that the students coming into the school are less academically inclined, right? So given that we know the pupil progress and stuff, now we can build on these 2 points, that which of these 2 reasons seems to be more likely, right? So now we'll move on to pupil progress. It can be seen that the pupil progress has actually improved not only from 5 years ago, but is also much higher than the national target. Thus, the Tonford seems to do well in this area and is improving. Furthermore, or additionally, this could also suggest that the reason for the falling exam results is indeed that the students at the school are not as academically inclined as they were 5 years ago. After all, the teachers are performing well enough to achieve significant pupil progress over time. This also suggests that perhaps the students are not that strong when they initially join the school and have much room for improvement, resulting in such an increase in their progress, right? And inspection grade, we can say again, this point is further strengthened by the fact that the school achieved a very good inspection grade, which was above the historical and national target standard of good, right? Lastly, the school now has, and we can perform the calculation, so it has 662 pupils and 35 teaching staff. So we can perform the calculation using our calculator. 662 to 35, and this is why it's important to take a calculator which you're very familiar with to the exam, so that in case they give you a Word document for an answer and it has some calculations, that you're quickly able to perform them. 18.91, and we'll just mention in brackets as a 6235 students per teacher as compared to, and 5 years ago it was 627 to 33, which was 19 students per teacher 5 years ago. The national target was, once more, was 22 to 1, meaning that this is yet another area where Tonford has improved its performance standard. So as far as striving for continuous improvement in performance standards, they've hit most of the targets, and we can mention even the one they did not hit, it has a good explanation for. So it can therefore be seen that Tonford has done well for this objective of continuously improving its performance standards. The overall story seems to be that there is a higher number of teachers per student, resulting in better quality of education, which helped improve the pupil progress and inspection grade. However, given the increase in students, because it went from 627 to 662 now, right? So over 5 years, in students from 627 to 662, it is also likely that Tonford has lowered the acceptance requirements and taken in some potentially weaker students, which resulted in the decline in exam results, right? So we've summarized the whole thing. Let's move on, because the risk is that we've written all this for objective 1 and that we spend too much time here. So if there are any other points, we can always come back. So objective 2, provide a supportive learning environment which encourages a high standard of pupil achievement. So this is where the inspection grade comes in, because they say there is a very strong sense of community values and citizenship, and they have genuine respect for their teachers and one another despite diverse backgrounds, as well as the fact that pupil to teacher ratio is lower than the average. Why is that important? Because that means fewer students per teacher. The teachers can devote more time per student and pay them more attention and support them more, right? So we need to explain that. It's not just enough to say, oh, also by the way, the pupil to teacher ratio is lower than the national target, that's good. No. Why? Why is that resulting in a more supportive learning environment? That's what the examiner wants, right? So we can say the inspection grade and report suggest that Tonford is doing well with regards to this objective, considering that the report says that there is a strong sense of community amongst and citizenship among students, which would likely result in a healthy learning environment for them to flourish. Furthermore, given the high respect the report says that the students have for the teachers, Tonford is clearly contributing in this regard, and the students are appreciative of it. One likely reason for this is Tonford's good pupils to teacher ratio, with fewer students per teacher. Tonford is enabling its teachers to spend more time per student and provide them with more support. This will help improve their standard of achievements, right? We're referring back to the objective. And we can also link this to the end result, that the pupil progress, right? It's very good. This can be witnessed from the very good pupil progress score that Tonford has recently achieved. Tonford has recently achieved, right? And we can summarize by saying overall that it seems to suggest that Tonford is doing well in this regard. Overall, Tonford seems to be doing well in achieving this objective. Okay, so it's not as much as we wrote for the first one, because the first one was very generic. It could be we could cover all the performance standards in it. Here it's a bit more specific, and I believe the third and fourth will be even lower given that, even less given that they're even more specific, but that's fine. Because again, it's overall for 12 marks. We've already hit around 4 or 5 points in the first part, 2-3 points in the second, so we're on target. Ensure that pupils are prepared for adult life and have the skills and character necessary to contribute to society. This again will have to refer to the inspection report: strong sense of community, citizenship, respect for teachers and one another, and so on, right? This objective, once again, seems to be achieved given the feedback from the inspection report. The report indicates that students have a strong sense of community values and citizenship, which are both essential in being a responsible adult and contributing to society. Right? Society. Moreover, the students have respect for teachers and each other despite their diverse backgrounds. Once again, these are important attributes to do well in the real world once they graduate from school. This is important, especially given the diversity of people within society. Right? We're just highlighting. Okay. But we can also talk about the grades and stuff. We can bring in this angle that pupil progress means that the students are being taught to continuously improve themselves. And that is again a necessary skill to have in adult life, that you're always focused on improving yourself and you're not complacent. To add to this, given the high pupil progress scores, it seems that Stanford has imbued an attitude to its students to continuously improve themselves and to not be complacent. But we can also mention the exam results. All that said, the exam results are a bit below target and an area where Stanford might need to improve, as academic standards are necessary to have proper skills to contribute to society, right? As high academic standards, right? So overall, Stanford seems to be doing well in this regard in all areas apart from the exam results, right? And last one, provide all children with access to high quality education regardless of their location or background. One of the possible reasons for the increase in students from 627 to 662 might be that Stanford is accepting more students from diverse backgrounds. This point is strengthened by the comments in the inspection report, which highlights that the students are from diverse backgrounds, right? So we're highlighting this. Therefore, or hence, Stanford has covered the aspect of being accessible to students regardless of their location or background. As far as the access being to high quality education, Stanford pupil progress score definitely suggests that they are helping students improve significantly. At the same time, the exam results are slightly below target, slightly below the national target. So Stanford cannot absolutely claim to have achieved a high quality of education. Nevertheless, having students, as we have mentioned above, Stanford's focus on being more accepting of students could be the reason for the lower exam results, given that the students at Stanford are steadily improving once at the school. It is very possible that the exam results will also improve over time. Okay, so yeah, I think that's enough for this 12 marker part. We're running short on time, so let's move on to part C. So we've covered all 4 objectives in quite an amount of detail. So part C will be now for the remaining 4 marks. And what's the requirement? It says explain the difficulties in assessing performance of schools in Duckland due to the qualitative nature of their objectives. Once again, this is something we talked about in our videos, that qualitative metrics, there are certain issues sometimes when it comes to performance management. For 4 marks, we'll make 4 points, and we need to refer to the schools of Duckland because they've mentioned those in the requirement. So we need to link the problems back to the schools of Duckland. So we can go back to the report itself, right? We can start by saying qualitative performance. What's the wording they've used? Let's use the same wording. Qualitative objectives. Qualitative objectives can lead to certain problems. Let's just go by the wording in the requirement in assessing the performance of the organization. First of all, there is a subjectivity involved in the whole matter, right? Because when it comes to quality, what one person considers good quality, another person might think is average quality, or another person might think is excellent quality. So there's a certain subjectivity in how they grade quality. Furthermore, it's not just about the scale at which they grade, it's also about the fact that different people will consider different things to mean good quality. And if we go back to the inspection grade report, where very good, good, we can highlight that as a fact, right? So we can start by saying, for instance, the inspection report grade can vary from inspector to inspector. One inspector might assess a school to be good, but another inspector might assess it to be very good due to the subjectivity involved. The subjectivity is not just restricted to the final grade, but also about what constitutes good quality, right? One inspector might focus more on diversity, while another inspector might focus more on community values, right? This once again will result in subjective assessments based on their differing priorities and opinions, right? So there is the subjectivity aspect of qualitative issues. So we can mention that, therefore, qualitative objectives are difficult to compare, especially side by side with quantitative objectives, which are easy to measure, right? And we can add the point that qualitative objectives also leave less room for comparison, in the sense that, for example, quantitative objectives, you have exam results, 62% you can compare to 63% of another school. But when it comes to the inspection grade, if Stanford has very good and another school has very good, how can you compare which one is better, right? It becomes more difficult. Quantitative it also makes comparison between two schools difficult. For example, one school having exam results of 65% is performing better than a school with 60%. However, if both schools have an inspection grade of very good, it is difficult to determine which one is performing better in that area. Okay, again, it's for 4 marks, and since we're low on time, I think we can stop here. If we had more time, we could of course add more points, but I think given that we've had 3 valid points, there's not too much we should be writing anyway. Okay, so the important things to remember for such a question, guys, as you saw, time management can be an issue, especially when they break down a part into 4 different objectives. Effectively, it's like 4 different parts. So 4 parts in part B, then 1 part in C, 1 part in A, 6 parts. That's why it takes a lot of time. Even though a lot of what we wrote was very similar in the objectives, when we compared them to each other, we had to reword them just to fit in under the particular objective, right? So please be careful not to get bogged down and just move on in such questions. Like I've said, better to have decent answers for all the objectives and all the parts than having some perfect answers under some of the objectives and some of the parts and some blank answers, right? That's what we did here. Sure, we could add some more points here or there, but overall we've done a good enough job. We've had enough points that we can move on to other questions and other parts, right? So hopefully that benefited you guys, and I'll see you guys next time.